What's going on, everybody? You know how I do. Welcome back to the Sell Better Daily Sales Show, where we bring you daily sales advice to help you sell better. Today, we are here to talk about one thing that I believe is probably a key to success for every top performing sales rep out there, and it is how to control our tonality. I'm going to introduce my guest today. He has been on the show before. I am a huge fan. Ronen Pessar, probably a cold calling legend when it comes to tonality. You train people all over the world about this, don't you?
Yeah, been at it for a while since 2015, and like have gone super deep into the world of cold calling. But great to be back. Love being on the show with you, James.
This is always a blast. You always drop nuggets. All right, so Ronen's going to teach us a thing or two. Scan this QR code, check us out, sellbetter.xyz, and subscribe on the YouTube channel. This is where you're all going to get the latest tips, techniques, tactics, and takeaways right there on the YouTube channel. We are spreading like wildfire, and I'm loving every minute of it. Here is what Ronen is going to cover today: why tone beats words on cold calls. I think this part is part and parcel to everything that we're going to discuss today. The words are a very small part. The way that you say it really does matter. We're going to talk about the first part of the call, the part that we all struggle with the most. How do we control that part of the call? And we're going to talk about voice tactics for questions and objections. Tonality matters in different regions of the world in different ways. Language changes over time. Let's kick things off with the why. Why does tone beat words? What's the math breakdown you have for everybody?
There's a little bit of a story that goes into this, and you might have actually heard about this science and the rule that we're going to cover. The story is that back in the 1950s and 60s, the world of psychology was very focused on trying to answer the big question of how did we just have World War II happen? What was going on in the world that could have made that situation occur? And a lot of the psychology at the time was then studying human behavior. One of the psychologists, his name was Albert Mehrabian, he was at UCLA, and in the 50s, he wanted to understand something that he later coined as the silent message. This has to do with believability in a message that is heard. So when we aren't sure whether or not I am believing what I'm hearing, how does the average human go about deciphering its believability? Can I trust it? Later, he goes on to write the book where it became famous, and this is called the 7-38-55 rule, or if you turn the ratios around, the 55-38-7 rule. And it's all about the breakdown of how humans will look at three different parts of the nonverbal cues that tell them what is believable in a message. And we're going to bring this all the way back to cold calling and sales in just two beats. But the breakdown is as follows. If I don't believe a message, 55% of people will look at body language. Does the body language support what it's saying? The word that they like to use is congruent. Is it congruent? Is it aligned with the message, or is the body language not aligned? The 38% is what I hear, the tone, the voice, it's audible. And the 7% comes down to the words themselves. And so an example of this would be if we were all at like an in-person all hands meeting, and there's some murmuring around the company about a round of layoffs coming. And we're all expecting the CEO to give us an update. And sure enough, he walks up into the front of the room and he's out of breath. And he goes, everyone, don't worry. Our finances are in a great position. Oh, no one's getting laid off. You guys are good. We're good. Let's get back to work. Will anyone believe the words?
That doesn't inspire confidence to me.
That's exactly right. So when there's a misalignment of what I'm hearing in the words and then the nonverbal
The
messages,
way it's coming
that's when
across.
this triggers. That's when this goes off. Yeah. And the cool thing about this is for a lot of us, it's intuitive. Many of us can't describe why we know that this is true, but it's built into how we interpret messages all day long. So if you're on a cold call, this is happening from the minute the phone is picked up. If you're on a sales call, this is happening throughout the sales call, especially because a lot of prospects already have a preconceived notion about a salesperson not necessarily being honest. So
Based on an experience that they had months, years ago, things you cannot control, right?
exactly.
Now, Ronen, we have a lot of tonalities that we can choose from in our arsenal, so to speak. I know I have several. I can pull them out as needed, but I've gotten really good at it over time. How do we get good at knowing which tone of ours to use when, where someone has told them it's not what you're saying, sweetheart, it's how you're saying it, right? How do we know?
Yeah. All right. Thanks for telling me that. What does that actually mean? I love that.
Right.
It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Okay, cool. But how? So the first obvious one is nothing beats experience, right? So actually picking up the phone and having tons of conversations will increase your odds of getting really good at this. But these four things that we have up on the screen are other things I'm really fond of. Practice the actual techniques themselves. And we're going to talk about some of the other items, inflections, and then the different kinds of tones. When it comes to actually practicing and getting good at this, I do have one drill that we can talk about a little bit later. But the idea is to get comfortable and familiar with the difference between trying to focus on not what I'm saying, but if I'm trying to make it sound a certain way, confident, non-combative when I'm asking a question that could be perceived as combative. There's lots of really good tones here. With any cold call opener, I usually talk about the 3 good tones, which we're not going to get so deep in today, but those would be like warm and friendly, confident, or the buttoned up professional, and then humor or funny.
Yeah.
But that's because those are disarming. And
Yeah.
in the first few seconds of the call, you don't really have much other than your tone to really try to disarm those first few seconds. So
Yeah.
practicing different kinds of tones. If you have a recording of yourself, someone else who you admire, listen, try to repeat it back. Then listen to yourself and see how did I sound? That's how I got good at different kinds of tones is I just did it on repeat. I would listen back to myself, my own calls, and hear moments that I'm not noticing in the moment that I sound like I'm speaking too fast. I sound unsure when I need to be sounding confident. Or even worse yet, I have a really awful uptone at the end of a question that shows I'm not really so trustworthy or even so like sure about what I'm saying when I ask a question.
Yeah. I like the upward and downward inflection. I think I talk about this book and this person frequently, but I'm a big fan of the Chet Holmes Ultimate Sales Machine. He talked a lot about cold calling and hitting gatekeepers. And there were 2 facts that I remember from this particular part of the book. There was one, the gatekeeper is definitely not an obstacle to be overcome. They're a human being just like you. You should treat them with courtesy and respect and make them an ally, not an obstacle. I loved that outlook. But then also he talked about the tone in which we talk to that gatekeeper. Most of us have a tendency to use that upward inflection where it's, hi, can I speak with Jim, please? And we sound really salesy in that moment, and the gatekeeper controls the response and the conversation moving forward versus that downward inflection. Speak with Jim, please. And that's extremely authoritative. And then you usually hear things like, I'll put you right through to his voicemail. And that's a good way to get that voicemail left. What do you think about the upward, downward? You've heard that before.
I think one of the easiest ways for your tone to betray you, meaning when you're saying what you're saying, the prospect is hearing it in a way and they're like, this person doesn't sound trustworthy. I can't trust the words that they're saying, so they're going to challenge it. And the worst part is when you're cold calling versus being on like a virtual or in-person sales meeting, all you have is your tone and the words because there's no body language. So you dialing this in can really make or break whether or not you're going to get the opportunity to have a conversation and where that will go. When it comes to uptones, what we mean, James, that was a good example. It's like, this is Ronen Pessar, and you weren't expecting my call. Do you have a few minutes for me to tell you why I called? The way I'm ending that, where the voice, it's getting higher and higher, a few minutes for me to tell you why I called, it shows that I'm perhaps nervous. It triggers this sense of salesy, as opposed to the downward inflection. Do you have a few moments for me to tell you why I called? Downward inflection, as you said, is more authoritative. It's these little things that we're all wired to pick up on them. As Morabian taught us, it's the silent message that we're constantly monitoring for to say, do I believe this? Or is there something here that I can poke at and say, not believable? And that's being done automatically. And if we trigger the, I don't believe this, now you're going to get a brush off objection, or the person will just, not be willing to really talk with you.
Dana points out that she is in Northern California, but calls into the South and Midwest and East Coast. And as we know, regional selling matters, tonality matters when you're calling into different places of the world. And right here, number 2, intentionally choose your tone. If you were calling into these places, how would your tone change a little bit based on the region?
So I love where you're going with this. And I don't think I'm an expert enough at knowing regional cultural differences to actually have a plan going into it. So my approach would be a little different. If I'm going to connect with anybody, I'm always going to have notes about that conversation. If it doesn't go well when I call them back, I'll see the note before I call them back. And so what I do is I'll categorize prospects as like combative, for example, or be more direct next time. Yep. And that'll also change my tone. So if I get someone who mid pitch or mid intro is just like, just tell me what you do. Like, sorry, I don't have time. Like that's its personality type. That's the fighter.
Sure.
So when I'm up against a fighter, the 2 things I want to try to do, first of all, be direct in what I'm saying. So I change my script slightly, but then my tone, I try to have it in a sense where I'm not going to trigger like a even more aggressive response. And so I'll have a little bit more of an uncertain tone. If I'm calling you back, James, and you have a fighter personality, I'll say, James, this is Ronen. I don't know if you remember we spoke a bit ago, and that's actually why I'm calling you back. Look, I don't know if this is for you or not, but last time I called you, what I was really hoping to do is to have a conversation around your procurement process today to see if there's a way that we might be able to help you speed up some of the common reasons why other CFOs we work with are having some challenges. Again, I'm not really even sure if this is going to be for you or not. You got a few minutes now to chat?
If I was an aggressive person, I think the slow approach would disarm me. I would expect a salesperson to be aggressive because I was being aggressive. But when you slow it down, I can imagine it being very difficult to remain aggressive.
Exactly. Yeah. Pacing is so overrated as one of the easiest ways to start to sound good. Slow it down. But with slow, I like to say slow and low, or if you want to call it the late night DJ radio voice, if anyone knows what radio is anymore, that's
Yeah.
one of Chris Voss's ways of describing the slow and low. It's soothing, it's non-aggressive. I'm not going to be fighting because this is the kind of tone that just relaxes people.
Let's move forward because there's a lot to be said here about the AEs in the room and the tonality that they need on that first call. An SDR on a cold call has a specific tone that lands them the meeting, but that tone isn't necessarily a tone that gets carried into that first call. So for all of our AEs in here that get on product demo calls or, discovery calls, what's the tone that they should be aware of, number one, and the tone that they should respond with and the way they should respond moving down?
Yeah, so this is such a great way to take it to the next level. The first thing is if you're an AE, and I just have to say this, who's doing a lot of Zoom selling, you're doing it over camera, it's really important to pay attention to your presentation visually because now you have body language involved. I don't know if this is something I should even say, but like a camera always on. I've seen AEs who don't, but being able to present the way that you want to be seen and felt is going to be part of the way to create that belief and trust. The thing also there is if a prospect has their camera off and I'm like on a first call with somebody, I'll always just drop it in. They're like, oh, hey, would love to actually meet you face to face if you don't mind turning your camera on. I just kind of put it out there because for me, I want to read their facial expressions while I'm talking and be able to pick up on things.
Yeah.
So similar to a cold call, the beginning of your disco, your first call with a prospect, there's going to be less trust and more suspicion, which is why I really like just some standard stuff here, like the professional buttoned up tone. If you're also pairing it with like an upfront contract, whether you're Sandler folks, and being able to set the tone for the agenda of the call, that kind of lets the prospect know what's going to happen. But that could be delivered in a way where you have a steady, almost midline pace, a little bit lower tone, where you go into, what I was hoping to cover with you today is A, B, and C. From our last call, it seems like this might be interesting. Before I dive into that, is there anything you want me to focus on today other than these things? Kind of getting into the upfront contract and agenda setting with a little bit more of a professional, stable tone. That's great. But what happens if suddenly there starts to be some conflict, an objection, friction? By the way, friction in sales is really good.
Yeah, people don't understand this. Let me just take this down. Let's pause for a moment on friction because I feel like this is a part where we encounter friction in the conversation and our tone changes involuntarily. That's going to lead well into the last part of our conversation here. But talk to me about the involuntary tone shift when we feel that friction and why this is folly. This is probably a big red flag for the buyer.
Yeah, so more like inexperienced sales reps will have their tone betray them in a sales call because their tone or response to things will indicate some level of angst or concern. So, for example, if a prospect starts to test the seller, and they say something like, oh, we've actually only budgeted like 10,000 for this. And I think your pricing is going to be way too high. Maybe they're testing you. If the response is, oh, yeah, don't worry about that at all. Like we can work through whatever is going to make the most amount of sense here. If I start to come back and my pace is fast, my volume is raised louder, and I'm kind of losing my calm and nerve, that's going to indicate that I might not be so trustworthy.
My anxiety is coming through.
Exactly. One really good tip here is before responding to anything, just take a beat, literally a physical breath, like 1,000. And then can you echo back the last few words of the question calmly in a way that gives you a moment to sort of pause and then get going on the way you want to approach it. And so that would sound like, oh, out of budget, uh, too much. And now I can respond with, was there a price that you were expecting? I want to remain, anytime I'm going to respond to an objection, I'm going to remain calm, but focus on an indifferent or even unsure tone. That's the word. So to sound unsure or uncertain, it's non-combative, but it allows me to ask questions to keep going deeper and deeper. If I'm doing that in a way where it is just straight up combative, that could lead to more conflict that is going to make it unsafe for the prospect to continue to work through it rather than safer for them to want to double down and keep working with you on answering your questions and describing exactly why.
Really like the unsure part of it. I think we often feel like we have to have all the answers, so we default to being that very heavy breathed, fast paced seller that knows exactly what to say, when to, oh, this falls right into that part of the script I know, right? And then boom, we're like on it. And we spit it out so fast, and it really damages our credibility in the grand scheme of the deal, which often we're not even to a point where we need to address that excitement. I typically have tried really hard, and it's hard for me. I'm a happy ears like victim of happy ears all the time. But lately I've tried to get less excited until the paperwork part starts. Then I start to get excited, right? And that seems to be a little easier for me to control my tonality through the deal. And then I can actually express the excitement when they start asking me for things like quotes.
You can actually use uptones at a certain point once you've already established some level of trust. It's just early on when there's nothing, especially on a cold call, not necessarily on a sales call. I would avoid it altogether. But in a sales call, having a slight uptone is fine if you're using it in a way to sound like unsure, uncertain, and you really want to push back on something. So again, with the pricing example, it sounds like there's something off about our pricing here. Was there a price you already expected? So it's a slight uptone there. It shows that I'm not quite certain, I'm not quite sure, and that gives them hopefully a window, an opportunity to lean into it and give me the response so that I can understand where they're coming from.
It's the leading part. That's what you want. You need it to lead them to be able to answer more, go deeper, talk more about it. I've always been fond of saying things like, well, it sounds like you've had a conversation about budget. Do you want to tell me more about that? Right. And that neutral tone, that monotone delivery gets me a lot of like, yeah, this is where we're at with it. We've already spent X. This year we're looking to spend Y. And if I can't get there, it's probably not going to happen. And now I've got where my range is, what I need to do. How can I effectively set the tone at the start of a first discovery meeting with a potential client who was difficult to book in the first place, so they understand the value of the conversation without feeling like they're being sold to right away?
I'm not a sales discovery pro, but I've been doing it quite a bit for my own business and just generally for the last few years as I've ventured out on my own. And what I've experienced is like when you put things up front at the beginning with your example here, I would even start by saying like, hey, I know you were somewhat hesitant to even join this call in the first place. Just want to call that out. It seems like you're not quite sure if there's going to be value in the rest of this conversation. So my goal for our conversation today is to explore whether or not that value exists, specifically like around the challenges you're having today and if that's enough to continue after today. Just call it out. I have a phrase I'm fond of saying, which is name it to tame it. So
Nice.
if you name the emotion or the situation that's occurring, that brings it out into the light, that allows you to tame it, that allows you to get a grip on it and control it so it doesn't wreak havoc in the background.
I put that in quotes there. That's quotable stuff right there. Go tweet that and tag Ronen for that one. Let's talk for a moment about when to switch our tones intentionally instead of involuntarily. Like I said, I feel like when we get friction, we change our tone involuntarily and it gives us away. But in some sense, we have to be able to recognize a cue from our buyer and shift our tone at the right moment so that we can create or keep the momentum going so that way the deal can move forward. When do we switch our tone intentionally, Ronen?
I can talk about cold call scenario and then a sales call example. With a cold call scenario, if you get someone who, this might happen from time to time, who's just like outright upset, clearly doesn't want to talk to you, feels violated in some way, and you're picking up on that. Maybe they're even calling you names, like if it's an extreme situation. My favorite tone switch from there, I like to use humor because humor can be disarming. Even if it's not actually funny, that person doesn't find like the sense of humor, but something
To be
about it.
cheesy, not funny, it's still disarming.
Exactly. So in the scenario where the person goes, you know what, I'm so tired of getting these calls. How did you even get my number in the first place? Can you just take me off your list and never call me again? Oh my God, James. I gotta own up to that. I'm so sorry. It sounds like the last thing you wanted to do was talk to a slimy salesperson on a cold call in the middle of a Tuesday.
That's a good one. You have to get a chuckle. Even if they hang up, I feel like I would get a chuckle out of saying that. I have a friend that does this thing where somebody will say not interested too soon on the call opener, and he'll go, "Oh, thank God. I'm so tired of talking about my product." And then laugh and laugh. It's a good way to disarm them. How do we sound straightforward without sounding aggressive?
I'm a fan of slowing the pace down quite a bit, lowering your volume. It could almost come off as like monotone, but just before you reach monotone. So I'm trying to think of an example of this where it's like non-aggressive. It could be seen as aggressive. I guess people have a lot of feelings when it comes to like, again, money, pricing, things like that. So if someone is like really feels like, you know what, I was expecting this to be a totally different price and this is not at all what we were planning. The very first thing I'm always going to do is start with a mirror and a label, which begins with the word sounds like or seems like. Oh, you know what, sounds like you were expecting this to be at a different price point. So I first have to always acknowledge what they say. But then when I'm going to respond in kind, maybe at this point, like even if it's a sales call, it shouldn't be a surprise. We've covered it a few times if that's the scenario. James, we've actually talked about this a few times and I'm a bit confused and lost here. Maybe you can help me out. Where have we missed? Where have we been misaligned when it comes to talking about pricing? Because I thought we covered this and it wasn't going to be out of budget for you.
Yeah. I like these tones because they're direct. They get the person talking. I think they're relevant to what's been said to you, and that's probably the most important thing, but they're non-aggressive. I don't feel like you're attacking me or like I'm under some interrogation light. What about different parts of the country that need different tones? And I know you said you weren't a regional selling expert. I happen to change my tones quite a bit when I'm cold calling in different regions. So I'll give you the examples that I use when I'm teaching people about this. If I'm calling someone in California, my speech is a little bit slower and a little more relaxed, and it kind of sounds like this. I say, "Hey, Ronen, what's going on today? I'm calling about X, and we should probably have a conversation about that. Do you have a second before your next meeting?" And it's a little soft. But if I'm calling someone in New York City, in Manhattan, my conversation is much quicker. "Hey, what's going on, Ronen? You got a second before your next call?" I'm saying the same thing, but one is a little more relaxed and a little more open, while the other one is a little more time sensitive, because people in Manhattan are a little more protective of their time than people in, let's say, San Francisco or people in San Diego or Southern California, right? Like these folks are a little slower paced. And when you realize that, you can adjust your tone, not yourself. And that's going to help you to break down more walls on cold calls. Ronen, final thought for everybody. In 10 seconds, what we have everybody leaving from this show thinking about today.
It's not what you say. No, I'm just kidding, guys. The biggest takeaway, if you want to implement something right now, slow down your pace, lower the volume, and that'll cover like 80% of scenarios where you'll just sound better, more confident, more trustworthy. And ultimately, at the end of the day, people buy from people they trust, not from people they like. So you want to be trustworthy.
People buy from people they trust, not necessarily people they like. I will say that it helps if you are liked. Thank you for coming in and sharing your wisdom with us. But I want to thank everybody for coming to the show today and learning from Ronen. We're going to have him back to talk more about tonality and maybe some other cold calling best practices. My man, thank you so much. Everybody go follow us, sellbetter.xyz. We do this every single day for you, for the people on the front lines. And I am happy to connect with anyone at Say What Sales. Thanks for spending some time with us. Shout out to you in the week. We hope you guys crush it. Let's go get it. Have a great day, everybody.